My status window finally updated after 7 years of life as a measly D rank hunter. Too bad it had to be after I had already given up on my own existence. But strangely, it wasn't over for me. This lady then appeared from nowhere, scaring the crap out of me. But she introduced herself as Miri and revealed to me that up until now, I've had an outdated status window causing my stats to remain the same over time. This was so shocking to hear, and in a fit of rage, I demanded compensation, and so she granted me 7 years worth of growth, and she even healed my broken leg. But strangely, my new system always needs a trigger, or so she said. A monster began to ravage the city, and Miri said the trigger would work if I faced the creature. This whole thing doesn't make sense, but my life up until now has been really shitty, so fine, let's just see. The moment my foot connected with that monster's face, I knew things had changed. For a guy who spent 7 years as a measly, bullied D-rank loser, squashing a creature in one kick felt borderline illegal. I surprisingly activated the skill Explosive Growth, and the effect on my body was immediate. My stats shot up significantly, allowing me to take down every last one of those nasty creatures like I was swatting flies. Some time passed before other hunters finally crawled into the space. Lee Youngjin was among them, and honestly, that guy is a walking headache. Then, one of his lackeys spotted me and asked if that wasn't Tae-jun. Asked what a loser like me was doing there, zooming into my face while I was busy picking up crystals and minding my own business. While they were being predictably annoying, a police officer walked up and thanked me profusely. She said that without me, it would have been incredibly dangerous, and thanked me for helping. I was surprised, briefly wondering if the heavens were handing me a honey platter, and I decided to use the chance to improve my image. I smiled and said it was nothing, claiming I just did my duty as a hunter. Lee Youngjin and his group looked like they'd swallowed bees, especially when the lady said I was amazing for handling so many venom spores alone. Youngjin, being the slow learner he is, asked her to repeat herself. Stunned that I handled it solo, I just pulled him aside and said we shouldn't get in the way of public officials, suggesting I'd explain everything in a bit. We headed to an abandoned building where they stood in front of me, demanding to know if I really did it alone. Youngjin asked if I really thought that was possible, calling me a punk. At that moment, a system request popped up on my screen. Teach these guys a lesson for an A-rank skill reward. This caused a surge of joy in me, because hitting these idiots and getting a skill for it is like hunting 2 birds with 1 stone. I knelt to the ground, feigning an apology, and asked if they'd mind if I gave them a beating. They were confused, especially when I started fake crying about being new to this, and asked again if I could give them a lesson. One of them walked up, calling me an idiot and asking if I'd lost my mind. He tried to grab my head to smack me, so I asked if he was serious about punishing me. Before he could utter a word, I smacked him across the cheek, sending him to the floor. The others were baffled, wondering if he'd just collapsed on his own. I invited them to come at me one by one, asking if they could handle a single flick on the forehead for bullying their senior. It was pure comedy watching them drop. Youngjin was shocked, asking if it was a joke, and if they were really going down from one attack. I walked up to Youngjin, who was the only one left standing, and said I might let the others go, but there was no way he was getting off the hook. He got cocky, telling me not to get full of myself just because I unlocked a physical ability, and he launched some ice spears at me. Perfect timing. I'd just picked up a new fireball skill from my request. I manifested a massive fireball over my head and asked how he liked it, mentioning I wasn't sure if I could control the power yet. I unleashed the maximum output, and it hit him so hard he probably saw his ancestors. What was left was a disheveled Lee Youngjin, huffing and gasping. I walked over and noted that it looked like he really had to pee, so he'd actually wet himself. I bent over and said it looked like he'd finally come to his senses, and he promised never to bully anyone again. I still gave him that final flick on the forehead though. I'm a man of my word. The scene then suddenly shifted to my house as Miri called out for me to wake up. She said it was time to head to the dungeon, but I told her to shut the fuck up, because I felt like I was dying from the pain. I'd been passed out for 3 days because I was reckless and pushed my mana to the limit. My extraordinary growth increased every stats except mana, and since that fireball skill uses double what I have, I told Miri I had no choice but to raise my mana levels. I mentioned I knew the perfect place, the Tower of Training. When we arrived, the place looked out of business. An old man who looked like he was on his last breath wandered out, muttering about a granny. I asked to take on the Tower of Trials, but he thought I was talking about fast food. Eventually, he realized I was a challenger and led us to an elevator. I told him I already knew the deal. 10 stages, start with 10 goblins. I had studied the strategies on YouTube, so I figured this beginner dungeon would be a piece of cake. However, when the trial started, the goblins looked more like giant ogres. It was a literal mob. I asked the old man what was going on, and he just kept rambling about Granny. What in the actual food? These things were way too strong. I activated my new skills and dashed through them.
Hey, watch out.
Even taking a hit that pushed me back. An ogre is still an ogre after all. But I twirled, kicked one straight in the face, and cleared stage 1. The old man said it looked too easy, which pissed me off since I was actually trying. The subsequent stages were hell. The monsters were stronger and more numerous than any guide suggested. I understood why no one came here anymore. The difficulty was mental. By the time I reached the final stage to face the hellhound Cerberus, I was ready to give up. I was out of mana, and there was no way I could beat that thing. Suddenly, a hidden quest appeared. Treat the senile NPC. It hit me then. This dungeon was built on the old man's mana, and he'd lost control of it, which caused the monsters to become absurdly powerful. I told Miri I had a plan, even if it was a long shot. I ran toward the old man, got behind him, and started massaging his bald head. I was redirecting his scattered mana back into his mind, while he babbled about nirvana. Just as Cerberus launched an attack that exploded through the space, the old man regained his senses. He apologized for the discomfort and suddenly transformed into a completely different, refreshed version of himself. He used one skill to vanish Cerberus instantly and called me his benefactor, offering me anything I wanted. I'd completed the hidden quest, and the reward was finally mine. Somehow, this senile old man is even more unhinged in this form than he was before. I stood there watching him do squats with his magic sword, which he had transformed into heavy weights, and honestly, I couldn't decide if I was impressed or just secondhand embarrassed. He finally dropped the weights, declaring that building physical muscle is the only way to handle high-intensity mana, claiming this was his secret to becoming an archmage. He introduced himself as the Archmage Elkeroid, and demanded I behold his muscles. I quickly declined, telling him I was good, as I'm really not in the habit of groping buff elderly men. He then mentioned that he still hadn't heard what I wanted, offering me anything at all. I confirmed that I was a little short on mana, hoping he could increase my capacity since I only had 30 out of my 200 left. He said it was an easy request and took a stance, and then he punched me square in the guts. This caused my mana to increase by 300, but its effect on my lungs was less pleasant. I began to cough and almost passed out. I asked him what the hell that was since I nearly died, but he just mused that my problem wasn't a lack of mana. When I asked what he meant, he said the issue lies with my fireball, explaining that I was using an excessive amount of mana for a skill that is usually basic. He promised to help me completely recreate it, which sounded like a lot of work. Later, I walked into a massive building to meet Lee Seon. Miri immediately began pestering me, asking who the woman was and insisting I couldn't possibly know her. I said she was an old friend from the Awakening Training Center, which surprised Miri. Apparently, she thought I was too miserable to have a female friend. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Miri. She asked why I called Seon here, so I explained I needed to test the new fireball technique I learned from that buff geezer. Miri noted I had more connections than she thought, which, yeah, obviously. When I approached Lee Seon, she asked what I had just said, but I just laughed it off. As we reached the elevator, she said it had been so long and asked how I'd been. I told her I was doing well, but then she moved closer, squinting at me. I asked if something was wrong with her face, causing her to move away and say it just seemed like I'd changed. She said I used to always need her help, but now I seemed more confident, which is a polite way of saying I used to be a loser. She then mentioned it was strange because someone else had asked to use the training ground today as well. She opened the door and said I'd be super excited to see who it was. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. In front of me stood Choi Jin-hyuk, looking incredibly annoyed. He glared and called out my name, and Lee Seon asked what was with the tension since it had been a year since we last saw each other. She then gave some directions, explaining that the training ground is a virtual space made with mana, where the monster's power depends on how much mana you use. She summoned a cute little monster that was far from cute, then walked out to grab drinks, leaving me alone with Jin-hyuk. The energy from him was uncomfortable, so I ignored him, used the system to create a massive ogre, and punched it 3 times. The ogre splattered instantly. It was a basic warm-up, but Choi Jin-hyuk was shocked. He asked if it was me, and when I asked what he meant, he told me not to play innocent. He said I was the one who messed up the guild juniors, calling me a jerk. He asked if I had awakened a new power, and then had the nerve to say I was beating up family members who used to eat from the same pot as me. That really pissed me off. Jin-hyuk used to be a friend I could rely on, but after he joined the benching guild and rose through the ranks, he turned into the arrogant prick standing before me. I responded in a very unfriendly manner, confirming that I did beat them up, and asking what he was going to do about it. I told him I roughed those punks up, because they were the ones who messed with me first. He started sweating, so I asked him where he was while I was getting beaten to a pulp in the past. He just watched, but now he wants to act tough? He screamed that I had some nerve and grabbed me. I told him he was strangling me and that I couldn't breathe, claiming this was now self-defense. We started to brawl just as Lee Se-yeon walked back in with drinks. She screamed, asking what we were doing. Jin-hyuk attacked with his 2 spears, and when I fell, I asked for a timeout. He said there was no timeout and struck again, which was a mistake because I kicked him straight in the face. He managed to dodge with his hand and noted that I'd actually gotten stronger. He said he'd face me seriously now, and I told him he should have done that from the start. He activated a thunder spell, causing Lee Se-yeon to scream that he was crazy for using that here. I took a stance and started summoning a massive blast, essentially a Kamehameha. It was the new S-rank Archmage Fireball. Jin-hyuk stood there in shock, realizing he couldn't block it. But before it hit, the vice president of the Myth Guild, Cha Yerin, appeared and sliced my fireball in half. I was shocked. He told me it wasn't an ordinary fireball, and warned that I could have caused a serious accident. I just said I was a bit off with the power since it was my first time. Choi Jin-hyuk thought I was in trouble, but then Cha Yerin grabbed my hand, smiled, and asked me to join the Myth Guild. Everyone was stunned. He's the de facto leader and one of the few S-rankers in the country. He said he'd never seen a fireball with that much power and called me a solid hunter. I paused. The Myth Guild is one of the big 4, alongside Hongik, Manhwa, and Cheongyeon. Joining would benefit me, but I decided to play it cool. I told him a hunter should consistently train to overcome limits, and claimed that my duel with Jin-hyuk today showed me he was a massive mountain I couldn't yet overcome, so I couldn't join yet. Jin-hyuk was baffled, knowing damn well that wasn't a training duel. Cha Yerin liked my spirit, and asked for my name and rank. I told him I was D-rank Lee Tae-jun. He grabbed my shoulder and said such talent was a waste, promising to exert some effort for me. That day I received a recommendation to participate in the B-rank evaluation. A month later, at the testing site, Mary asked me why he tried to recruit me so suddenly, to which I then said to her that it was obvious. Guilds just use you and toss you aside, and I want money more than ever. Then Yu Se-rin walked up, and asked if I was taking the test too. I shook her hand, and she mentioned rumors were spreading about a promising talent that the Myth Guild's VP was watching. I just smirked. It's hilarious that Cha Yerin is working so hard to recruit me. Suddenly, some guy named Hang Jian broke in, calling me a mediocre man and saying nothing good comes from a hyped-up banquet. He claimed he was destined to be the greatest hunter, and I honestly wondered if he was off his meds. The 32nd B-rank evaluation began, and the mentor was revealed to be none other than Choi Jin-hyuk. He explained we'd be in teams of 2. Team A was Yu Se-rin and Hang Jian, while I was Team D with Kim Jun-hyun. He also informed us that the entire session will be recorded. As we walked toward the gate, Jin-hyuk smirked, thinking he was going to make me regret using him for my own benefit. I walked into that dungeon having no idea what to expect. Before we even set foot in this dump, Kim Jung-hyuk had a little mischievous chat with Choi Jin-hyuk back at the Binshin Guild. Jin-hyuk, being the delight that he is, asked if Jung-hyuk was even listening properly, insisting that all he had to do was participate in the assessment and disrupt my progress. He mentioned that the D route was specifically designed to be harder than the standard one, so if Jung-hyuk interfered, I wouldn't be able to pass easily. To really twist the knife, he brought up how Jung-hyuk's mother had been sick, and suggested he take this chance to make some money for her surgery. He promised Jung-hyuk would be well compensated if he handled me. Back inside the dungeon, Jung-hyuk was internally losing his mind over how he'd ended up on the D route with me. When monsters suddenly attacked, I immediately struck them down, clearing the path with such ease that I had to wonder why they were so weak, which caused Jung-hyuk to freeze in shock. He wondered how I'd gotten so strong in just a few weeks, remembering me as a good senior, who gave him hope, yet here he was, supposed to make me fail. He felt like trash, but with his mother's surgery on the line, he felt he had no choice. He pulled a bottle from his jacket and handed it to me, claiming it was a buff potion he always brings on expeditions. I gulped it down instantly, which pleased him because he thought he'd successfully given me paralysis poison. The effect of the poison struck my belly instantly, but it wasn't paralysis. It was a sudden, desperate need for a bathroom. I muttered about where the nearest toilet was, and when Jung-hyuk said there wasn't one, I cursed my timing and decided I had to clear the dungeon as fast as possible. Hyuk was baffled that the poison wasn't working. Little did he know, my ability to withstand all poison had kicked in. As we cleared more beasts and reached a dead end at a cliff, I complained about the dungeon layout making me go in circles. Hyuk saw his chance and, hoping it wouldn't kill me, lunged forward to push me into the pit. I simply moved aside, causing him to fly past me. I managed to grab his trousers just as he was about to fall. He started screaming that he was garbage and should just die, revealing that he had been trying to make me fail for his own gain. I realized this was incredibly bad timing given my stomach situation, and since the whole thing was being live-streamed, I couldn't exactly ease myself right there. Suddenly, the rock gave way, and we both fell into the pit, landing hard but alive, only to be greeted by a chorus of hissing from a swarm of monsters. The scene shifted to Team B, who were already exhausted and failing. Hwiryeong eventually just screamed and ran off, leaving young Dong-jun to the monsters. Team C was also struggling to work together and facing elimination. That left only Team A, Cha Yerin, and Hang Jian. Cha Yerin was busy talking to her livestream about taking down thousand-year white snakes, but when she saw Hang Jian taking all the glory, she got pissed and unleashed her Frostwind skill to summon frozen creatures. They reached the boss room first, where Choi Jin-hyuk congratulated them. He mentioned that Team D's signal was gone, and they were likely eliminated, causing Hang Jian to brag that he knew I wouldn't amount to much. But when they walked into the room, they were shocked to find a necromancer who had turned the Imugi into an undead thrall. What they didn't know was that Jung-hyuk and I were coming in hot. Jung-hyuk's absorption skill, which returns magical attacks to the sender, combined with my Archmage's fireball to create the Lee Tae-jun X Kim Jung-hyuk collaborative health train. I kept feeding him fireballs, asking if he could eat more, and we dashed toward the boss at an astonishing speed. In the boss room, Choi Jin-hyuk was panicking because the Imugi was dead and replaced by a leech necromancer. He realized someone had tampered with the dungeon. As the leech sent serpents to attack, Jin-hyuk tried to defend himself with spears, while Cha Yerin and Hang Jian used ice arrows. However, the necromancer redirected Cha Yerin's attacks back at them. Jin-hyuk recklessly charged the necromancer, but the Imugi wrapped its tail around him. He thought he was a goner until Jung-hyuk and I appeared, striking the snake right in the face. Jin-hyuk was alive but stunned that I had survived. I dashed away as the Imugi attacked again, noting that a leech and an Imugi were way too extreme for a B-class test. Jin-hyuk admitted someone must have interfered to make sure I didn't pass. I told him I got the general idea and suggested we just take the guy down. Despite not wanting to work together, we formed an alliance. The snake spat poison, which Jin-hyuk blocked, and I used 20% of my fireball to clear the air and strike the snake, allowing Jin-hyuk to finish it off. The leech seemed defenseless, so Cha Yerin buffed Hang Jian, who dashed forward only to pass right through the creature. I forced my hand into Jung-hyuk's mouth so he could use his skill again, but even then, the leech took no damage. It suddenly struck the ground with a bone skill, sending spikes through the field that tore our clothes and dealt heavy damage. I wondered what we were missing, as the leech seemed immune to everything. Just then, Miri mentioned how hard she'd worked on my status window upgrade, and suggested using a map hack key to launch a navigation system so we could finally deduce what was really going on in this space. I immediately called out to Miri, asking what she was suddenly talking about, but then I saw my screen flickering as the system acquired the dungeon's landscape information. Miri explained that this ridiculous function allowed me to see everything from enemy skill paths to hidden routes and item rewards, making it less of a map and more of a total cheat code. She mentioned she'd installed other apps for me to utilize during combat. I couldn't believe such a function existed, but considering the original boss was supposed to be a B-class Imugi and we were currently staring at a monstrous leech, I wasn't about to complain. The leech, which was far scarier than any snake, started laughing and screaming about how Eratos-chan was happy to gather such fresh humans for the contractor. Miri's new translator seemed to be malfunctioning because I barely understood its weird babbling, but the word contractor stuck out. I asked Choi Jin-hyuk if he could still move, and he confirmed he'd avoided a fatal wound. I told him to trust me because I'd found its weakness, and though he didn't say a word, he clearly understood the assignment. Step 1 was to piss the skeleton off. I screamed at the leech, asking what it was doing, and mocking it for having a brain freeze. It screamed back, calling me egotistic and promising to slaughter us all. It struck its staff on the ground to cast a spell, but because of the navigation, I saw it coming and told everyone to get behind me. We survived unscathed, which clearly confused the leech. I laughed at it again, telling it that its skill shots were absolutely whack. Choi Jin-hyuk tried to calm me down, as I was only fanning the flames. I barked orders like a madman, telling Hang Jian to take 3 hits and ordering Kim Jong-hyuk to take 5 steps back. Because they actually listened, they dodged every strike. The leech, now beyond pissed, unleashed a massive AoE attack that covered the entire dungeon. We were stunned for a second, but I realized the trick. The attack, Death's Reclaim, is stronger at the edges and weaker at the center, dropping to only 10% power at the innermost point. We burst through the smoke completely fine, and I screamed that the bastard was on cooldown and we could attack now. The leech was shocked, wondering how we survived, but I ran right past it. I knew its trick. The leech was summoned by a contract and used a host as a sacrifice. Until that host was destroyed, it was virtually immortal. I spotted the sacrifice sealed inside a box, the skeleton's main body. The leech realized we had deceived it and raced toward the chest, but Choi Jin-hyuk intercepted it, screaming that the bone pal wasn't going anywhere without his permission. He struck the leech from behind, pinning it to the ground and telling me to finish my side. I punched through a wall, revealing the hidden space where the chest was kept. I grabbed it, and the leech, realizing I'd found the one spot only it and the contractor should know, began to wonder if I was even human. The leech forced its way out of the grip and dashed towards me. I held the chest over my head and told Skoll that if he came any closer, I'd throw it away. I claimed I understood the ancient language and told him to listen carefully if he wanted to live. He laughed, saying he only obeyed the contractor, but I asked him what happens to a contract when the source is canceled. He was skeptical that an ordinary human could do such a thing, so I asked him if I looked ordinary to him. He finally bowed, asking what I wanted. My stomach was still killing me from that poison, so I ordered him to release all the other skeletons in the dungeon first. Then I demanded he bring me everything he had. He tried to play coy, claiming he didn't have anything useful, but I squeezed the chest and threatened to break it. He finally gave in and handed over his staff. He begged me to release the contract then, but I just laughed and told the stupid leech that I didn't even know how to use magic, let alone release a contract. He was insulted, but I didn't care. I smashed the chest onto the ground. The leech's body began to fade away, disappearing in a display of dramatic regret. On the floor where he stood, I noticed a severed finger, the contractor's offering. Miri suggested someone might have been targeting me specifically, but I told her I didn't care as long as I got the loot. I shoved the staff and some expensive-looking cores into my inventory just as the others ran in. Hang Jian actually admitted that I was impressive and recognized me as a strong hunter. Kim Jong-hyuk then apologized for the poisoning. He admitted he didn't like how hard I worked, despite having no talent, which is such a backhanded apology it's almost funny. I smirked and told him his plan was half-baked anyway, mocking his bad head for thinking I'd fall for it. Still, I extended a hand and suggested we grab a meal to celebrate becoming B-class hunters. He offered to treat me, and then awkwardly asked if I liked Lee Seon. I told him to shut up, wondering what was wrong with him. The gate opened, and Cha Yerin screamed with excitement. But as we passed through the portal and the tension eased, my stomach reminded me it wasn't finished. Waiting outside were Hwiryeong of the Clear Sky Guild and Ma Tae-pyong of the Hwiryeong Guild, top-tier hunters. Hwiryeong mentioned that someone had manipulated the evaluation, turning the Imugi into an undead and summoning the leech. She concluded that this was the work of a force trying to sabotage the major guilds and then dropped the bombshell. The culprit they were suspecting was me, Lee Tae-jun. I stood there, confused and bloated, wondering how my day could possibly get any worse. Cha Yerin and Hong Jian immediately jumped to my defense, insisting that I was a comrade who had fought right alongside them. Hwa just looked at them with that condescending, "I'm an S rank and you're not," gaze, questioning the whole comrade narrative. She pointed out that from her perspective, it looked like I was the one doing everything, from ordering everyone around to dodge the leech's attacks to discovering hidden locations. She noted it was incredibly strange for a D-rank hunter like me to know such crucial information. Suddenly, Cha Yerin's loyalty wavered faster than a cheap tent. She glared at me and demanded to know if I had known in advance that the leech would appear. I didn't actually know, But I wasn't about to tell her that. Before I could process the betrayal, Tae-jun chimed in, asking what I was hesitating for and threatening to slice me down right there if I didn't answer quickly. These top-tier hunters were really thinking of killing me over a hunch. There had to be a way to clarify this mess involving the leech, the sacrifice, and the contractor. I asked everyone to wait and listen to me, and then I dropped a total lie. I told them my dream had always been to become a necromancer. They were all stunned, asking what the hell I was talking about. I doubled down, claiming I'd researched necromancy since I was a child, studying every characteristic and weakness of the undead. I told them that was how I figured out the weakness. I pulled out the finger I'd found earlier. I explained that this finger from the sarcophagus proved a contract had been made. The leech wasn't a natural occurrence. Someone had deliberately manipulated the examination to release it. A leech can never disobey its contractor, so since it attacked me and the other hunters, we couldn't possibly be the culprits. If I were the one pulling the strings, there would be no reason to protect my comrades. Tae-jun screamed, wondering if it was someone from the dark magic circles. I smirked, enjoying the drama, and told them the truth is always one. The culprit was right there among us. I ordered everyone to check the hands of those around them. One of the security personnel immediately panicked and tried to run. Clearly the owner of the missing finger. Miri was baffled, asking how I knew the culprit was there. I told her that in detective manga, they always catch the culprit like this.
Nani?
Tae-jun and Hwiryeong dashed after the runner. Tae was furious that someone had touched his apprentice and used his ability to strike, but the man took his own life before he could be captured. Tae ordered the corpse sent to headquarters to find out who he was. Hwiryeong, now deep in thought about someone targeting the Clear Sky and Hwiryeong guilds with dark magic, turned to me and apologized for the misunderstanding. She promised to repay me for the incident, but right as she said it, I fell to the ground because my mana had finally run out. I eventually woke up in a hospital room to see Choi Jin-hyuk and Lee Se-on. Jin-hyuk was on his phone, complaining about the internet, saying I took down the leech alone, insisting I wouldn't have accomplished anything without him. Lee Se-on argued back, saying the video showed I was carrying the whole team. It felt nostalgic watching them bicker like that. Then, Hwiryeong walked in. When I asked how she got there, she reminded me she runs the hospital. She told me I could rest assured since she owes me a debt for saving Cha Yerin, which apparently tore her heart apart just thinking about. She told me to tell her whatever I desired as a reward. I couldn't think of anything immediately, so she laughed and said I could come to her office on the top floor whenever I decided. After she left, Lee Se-on hugged me way too close, gushing about how much I'd grown since the days I used to get lost in dungeons. I told her to stop because it was uncomfortable. Jin-hyuk called me a lucky guy, and Lee Se-on asked if I'd decided on a wish. I thought about asking for a magic item, since Hwiryeong is a legend among wizard hunters. Lee Se-on told me to just focus on recovery, and handed me a bottle to drink. Once they left, Miri started babbling about how a beauty like Yanhua offering a wish made her heart race. I asked her what she was even on about and started weighing my options. Money is great, but asking an S rank for cash is a rookie move. I needed something priceless. I asked Miri where the items I'd looted went, and she explained they were in the Parsley Market vault. She told me the Parsley Market is a massive second-hand platform for users from various dimensions, offering VVIP benefits and secure transactions. It sounded like a mid-roll YouTube ad. I realized that if I'm the only one on Earth with this upgraded status window, I could monetize artifacts from other dimensions and listen to the money roll in. I connected immediately and was teleported to a bustling market full of people screaming about their products. It looked like a generic mobile game. I walked up to a man and asked the price of a dragon skin shield. It was 18,000 parsley coins, which Miri translated to 240,000 magic stones, well over $1 billion. I realized I was broke. I pulled out the staff I got from the leech and asked for the going rate, but the man told me it was unsellable because of a curse. Then I showed him a crystal I got from the same monster, and he appraised it at 10 parsley coins. Trash. Total junk. Just as I was about to leave, a guy called out to me, wanting to look at my crystal. I told him it was junk, but he was enthusiastic, claiming that if he enhanced it, it would be useful. He offered to cover the enhancement cost on one condition. If it failed, I had to pay the costs, but if it succeeded, it was free. He started laughing, and Miri warned me he looked like a scammer. She was right. This was a classic scam to trap a newbie with absurd costs. No one but a fool would fall for this. I asked him if I could stop the enhancement whenever I wanted, and he said yes. I told Miri not to worry because I had a winning strategy. I was going to show them what it means to break a luck-based game. I activated my extraordinary growth skill, and the enhancement success rate shot through the roof. The rules were simple. I could keep enhancing until I decided to stop. If I succeeded, the other party covered the costs. If I failed once, I had to pay everything. The higher the success, the greater the risk. The man gave me 100 parsley coins and some materials, asking if I needed him to show me the perfect spots for enhancement. I laughed, asking what kind of perfect spots I'd need for a first-level enhancement. I told him I'd go for it like a man. I didn't use any force, and the first enhancement succeeded. The man mentioned he thought the success rate was only 80%, saying I had more guts than expected. He taunted me, saying I shouldn't just do one and run away if I was a real man. I smirked and told him I was going straight to +9, and he could chicken out if he was scared. He was shocked, asking if I was sure. I asked him if he was the one who was scared. He thought I was an idiot, believing the chance of succeeding to +9 was less than 0.001%, but he took the bet. I started clicking that enhancement button repeatedly. Even Miri was scared, asking if I was seriously doing this. The man laughed, saying this madman was going for it, and that I was done for. But then I smiled. The whole thing was a success up to +9. The man was stunned, wondering if I was a game admin. He desperately wanted me to try once more, mentioning I was only one enhancement away from max and that I should go all the way. I looked at him and thought about it. Thanks to my extraordinary growth buff, I had a 100% chance up to level 9, but the final jump was only 10%. If I failed now, I'd lose everything. Still, I couldn't resist the curiosity of what an overpowered max item would look like. I agreed, but insisted on going to the perfect spot at Prayer Peak. People there were begging and pleading for their items to survive. I felt the aura, the lament and sorrow of all those broken items. Miri asked if being here actually increased my chances, but I told her it was about the flow of luck. I explained that if you can read the timing and the cheers of the crowd, you can overcome low odds. Right as I raised my hand, I felt the flow was with me and clicked. The man thought I was a crazy fool, but to everyone's astonishment, it was a success. The obsidian crystal of passing portal became 10+ with a twilight glow. I laughed so hard. Everyone looked at me like I was a god. The man screamed that I was a con artist using an illegal program, but I asked him who the real scammer was, the one trying to extort a newbie, or me. He threatened to report me, so I immediately logged out, telling him to be happy and thanking him for the resources, and then I blocked him. Back at the hospital, Miri asked what I would have done if I failed, and I told her I'd simply have run for it. In Seo Yanhua's office on the top floor of the hospital. When I knocked, she said to come in, and there I was. I asked the Vice Guild Master if she was feeling better, and she asked the same of me. I mentioned that while I wasn't fully recovered, I was able to move, which was a clear improvement. She chuckled, noting that my visit must mean I had decided on my reward. She began to wonder if her intuition was correct. After all, I was the undisputed first place in the last assessment, and she believed I would grow to become one of the top hunters in Korea. As I walked toward her, I grabbed her hand and told her that I wanted her. Of course, she was confused and asked if I was saying I wanted her skills. She even asked if I always talked like that. I just looked at her and asked if I had said something wrong, to which she claimed it was just a misunderstanding on her part and told me not to worry. I was genuinely confused. Miri just looked at me, clearly dumbfounded at my stupidity. We got down to business. Seo Yanhua said that since my wish was just for her to lift the curse from my item, it was simpler than she expected. I gave her the staff I'd found as a D-rank hunter. She placed it on a surface and mentioned that with her S-rank dispel skill, it shouldn't take long. I was amazed watching her. Her skill nullifies the formula of any spell trap. But what I really wanted was that skill itself. My 10+ crystal can mimic and store skills, so I planned to lift the curse and steal the skill simultaneously. Suddenly, a crack in space occurred, and a hand reached out and scratched her. She dashed back swiftly, and I was shocked by the monster that appeared. I ran toward the Vice Guild Master and kicked the monster, but physical attacks didn't work. I used a 20% fireball to hit the creature away and checked on her. She mentioned she wasn't fatally injured, but had let her guard down. I asked what that monster was, and she told me it wasn't a monster. It was a cursed spirit, the curse from the staff itself. She said the curse was more deeply rooted than she thought, and that she couldn't use her dispel right now because of a debuff. She suggested forcing it to dissipate, which would destroy the staff. I couldn't let that happen. I'd lose the item and the skill. I asked if she had power infusion, and if she'd lend me her dispel temporarily. She warned me that a high-level curse required complex calculations that even she struggled with, but I asked her to trust me. She placed her hand on my back, and I received the buff. I thought to myself that if she couldn't do it, I'd just do it myself. I set up my crystal camera to capture everything and activated the dispel. She asked if I could see the formulas and told me to plug them in, but I told her I already understood what I was doing. She was surprised, saying it wasn't something I could do by instinct. I told her not to worry as I used the skill exactly as intended. I told that spirit to get out of my way because I had an item to sell, and I punched it with my automatic spell dispel macrover. The creature roared and disappeared. Hwiryeong was shocked I dispelled it so quickly, noting even a genius would need 5 years to analyze that structure. I turned to her and told her she was incredible, saying I could see why an S rank was on a different level. She was confused, realizing I was far more impressive than expected. She even thought that me joining the Clear Sky Guild might be a burden for me. She then suggested I check out the Hwiryeong Guild, mentioning that Ma Tae-pyong had something for me. Next thing I knew, I was at Hwiryeong Mountain. Ma Tae-pyong was fighting a massive creature, screaming that I'd made a great choice because his Rising Dragon Fist was the ultimate martial art. He told me to watch closely, and I did. He dashed forward with Phantom Step and used the Rising Dragon One-Horn Strike. The creature dispersed, and he asked if it was impressive. I gave him a thumbs up, and told him it was truly impressive. The angle was just right. I kept the crystal going, copying all his skills while he showed off. The scene cut to the Shinhwa Guild training room, where I was busy refining the skills I had just borrowed from Ma Tae-pyong. Watching my movements, it really looked exactly the same as when that old man does it. I really did snag a top-tier item with that crystal, but my gratitude was cut short by a notification. Apparently, due to my pathetic strength stats, the damage of the Rising Dragon Divine Fist was reduced by 50%. I should have listened to that old man and worked out a bit. This frustration caused an audience quest to trigger, demanding I train my strength by practicing the skill. I was looking at practicing each move over 2,000 times. No matter how I calculated it, that's at least 10 hours of mind-numbing repetition. Then again, compared to the grueling 7 years I've already endured, this is nothing. I decided then and there to max out my strength stats and began my extreme training. While I was lost in my session, Lee Seon approached carrying a gift basket. She called out my name and suggested that while training is good, I should pace myself and have something to eat. She stopped dead in her tracks, visibly surprised by my physical transformation. She wondered when I had managed to gain so much muscle, noting that I had been acting strange lately. Not long ago I was just an average person, but now I was passing the B-rank hunter exam with flying colors, and attracting interest from leaders like Ma Tae-pyong and Hwiryeong. She watched my rapid growth and mused that I seemed to be soaring like a butterfly emerging from a cocoon. Just then, Cha Yerin appeared, startling her. He mentioned he'd heard she was practicing the vision saw technique in the training room. Lee Seon panicked, realizing she hadn't technically asked for permission to use the room. But Cha Yerin just tapped her on the head and told her not to worry because he trusted her. He looked over at me and noted an unusual aura, recognizing the martial art I was using. He walked up to me and mentioned he'd heard I passed the B-rank exam, saying his eyes hadn't deceived him. I laughed and thanked him for his kindness, acknowledging that I'd learned a lot from him, mostly by stealing his friend's moves, but he didn't need to know that. He then asked if I was still a freelancer, and when I confirmed I was, he made an offer. He explained they had an expedition scheduled in 4 days, with Lee Seon as the team leader, but they were a member short after someone dropped out due to an injury. Lee Seon immediately tried to intervene, telling him the expedition might be too challenging for me. I asked what grade the dungeon was, and she said it was grade 2, and the first time it had been transferred, meaning there was 0 information and plenty of dangerous variables. I was honestly a bit pissed that she was so blatantly underestimating me. Cha Yerin waved off her concerns, telling me that at my skill level, I should be able to clear it. He suggested that training with real monsters would be more beneficial than simulated ones. I realized he was right. I told him I was in, but I had one condition. As a freelancer, I get to keep all the magic stones I find. 4 days later, I was out on the streets, checking my phone. I'd received messages telling me to be there by 11:30 and not to be late. Miri was nagging me, asking if it was safe to move around when the person behind the evaluation manipulation hadn't been caught yet. I told her not to worry because I was with the Shinhwa Guild. She asked if they were trustworthy, and I reminded her that Ma Tae-pyong and Cha Yerin have been friends for 20 years, so the odds of Shinhwa being involved in the plot were close to 0. Besides, with the rising dragon fist and my defensive techniques, I'm practically invincible. At the Grade 2 dungeon entrance, I met up with Lee Se-on and her team. I was introduced to Choi Yu-shik, Jung, the healer, and the youngest member, No Young-chu. Just as we were about to head in, a horn blasted behind us. A very fat man stepped out of a car and rudely told me to move, asking if I was deaf. I asked if this was our final member, and he just glared at me and spat on the ground, demanding to know who this punk was. He pushed past us, complaining about wasting time. Lee Se-on told me to calm down, explaining that he was Kim Ji-hoon, an A-rank freelancer known for being a piece of trash. Apparently his personality is garbage, but his skills are unrivaled, and he uses his status to hog all the magic stones for himself. I looked at this irritating pig and realized he wasn't even trying to hide his rotten nature. I decided then and there to give him some special treatment. Inside the dungeon, monsters began to swarm. Lee Se-on tried to maintain a formation, but Kim Ji-hoon immediately dashed ahead, slicing through a monster and mocking us, saying his attacks didn't even feel sharp because it had been so long. Lee Se-on scolded him for going solo, but he just called her a crazy and said the team wasn't progressing because of her weak leadership. He laughed and walked off, and I watched him with pure annoyance, wondering when I could finally deal with this jerk. We eventually reached a tower where we met Duke Duas, the lord of the land. Kim Ji-hoon told the old man to stop yapping and get to the point. The duke explained that the land was cursed, and that a holy artifact used to quell the evil had been stolen and broken into 4 pieces hidden in the north, south, east, and west. Kim Ji-hoon immediately suggested splitting into pairs to search, which No Young-chu and Yeon Ah-young thought was fine since there was no boss monster. Lee Se-on wanted us to stay together for safety, but I agreed with Kim Ji-hoon's plan and volunteered to team up with him. As we walked away, I told Kim Ji-hoon it was an honor to work with him. I told him I was inspired by his belief that skilled hunters deserve all the fame and money, and I claimed I wanted to follow his great example for life. The idiot laughed, thinking he'd found a devoted lackey. We reached a graveyard, and he predicted tons of monsters were lurking there. I asked for a favor, pretending to be a worried newbie, and asked if I could handle a small, separate area alone so I wouldn't get in his way. He laughed and told me to go ahead. Because of my map skill, I knew exactly where the monsters were. I stayed in my little corner and started racking up high-grade magic stones. Kim Ji-hoon was pissed because nothing was appearing on his side, and he watched me with suspicion. He decided to use his Taemun's wide area taunt to pull everything to him. That was exactly the skill I wanted to steal. Lee Se-on had mentioned it was his only special move, and it looked perfect for my collection. The dumb pig had no idea how many monsters were actually hiding there. When he saw the massive swarm approaching him, he panicked and screamed for me to help. I played dumb, saying I wasn't sure if it was okay to intrude on his designated area without permission. He told me to stop babbling and help, so I told him I'd do it as long as there were no complaints if I took them all down. I moved swiftly, using my stolen skills to wipe out the swarm in record time. I gathered a mountain of magic stones while Kim Ji-hoon stood there in shock, wondering who the hell I actually was. I gave him a thumbs up and thanked him for his taunt skill, repeating that I'd follow him for life. He was ready to leave since we found the artifact, but I told him we weren't done. I suggested we stay and help the others gather more magic stones. Using my navigation skill, we regrouped with the others and tracked the remaining monsters with ease. No Young-chu was practically drooling at the sight of the loot, admitting he had never seen so many magic stones in his life and doubting they'd even fit in my inventory. I looked at the mountain of stones and realized he was right for once, so I decided to play the saint and suggested splitting the stones among the members of Xinhua Team 3. Lee Se-on and the others were shocked, trying to argue that they couldn't possibly take what I had hunted, but I waved off their modesty. I told them everyone worked hard, and that I was just following the cool example of Sir Kim Ji-hoon. I turned to Kim Ji-hoon and asked if he was okay with it, knowing full well I was robbing him blind in front of an audience. The poor guy could barely stutter out a protest before the team started screaming about how cool he was. They showered him with newfound respect. He looked so confused he couldn't even speak. They began shoveling stones into their status windows while I watched, internally cackling at how easy it was to play them all. Once the loot was secured, Lee Se-on approached Duke Duas at the tower with the artifacts. The Duke thanked her, claiming the land would blossom again, and asked her to hand them over so he could perform the offering. Lee Se-on asked him how he had survived when everyone else was slaughtered by the unleashed evil. The old geezer paused, then dropped the act, sneering that she was clever but too late, stating that the mere proximity of the gems were enough for him. revealing himself as the hidden boss. I noted that something felt off. A dungeon this large with no boss made zero sense. We realized then that the entire quest was a setup. The old vulture had been the final boss from the start. Duas commanded us to witness his resurrection, and used a charm skill on Lee Se-on. She started walking toward him like a mindless puppet. I called out to her, but then, the rest of the team, Choi Yo-ship and the others, attacked me from behind. The Duke had charmed the whole lot of them. I noticed my passive skill nullification was active, making me the only one unaffected by his low-budget magic. When the Duke asked how I was resisting him, I flicked my finger at him and told him I just wasn't interested in old vampires, suggesting he try charming grannies at a senior center instead. Pissed, he ordered my comrades to tear me to pieces, hoping I'd suffer a tragic death at their hands. It was troublesome, but I just used my fingers to flip their foreheads one by one, knocking them out instantly. When I got to Kim Ji-hoon, I decided a regular flip wasn't enough, and punched him into the dirt for good measure. I told the vampire he was underestimating me. Knocking out these amateurs without a scratch was easy peasy. The Duke, frustrated that his full power hadn't returned, ordered Lee Se-on to protect him. She dashed at me with terrifying speed. Too fast for a simple forehead flip. I worried that using the Divine Dragon Fist would be fatal, and the Duke just mocked us, calling it a perfect tragedy of lovers killing each other. I glared at him, wondering what this senile bloodsucker was babbling about, but then I noticed Lee Se-on's body was glowing pink. She suddenly froze. I realized strong emotions might break the charm, so I decided to test a theory. I called out to her and confessed that I had sold the wallet she gave me for Christmas on the carrot market because I was broke. That did the trick. She went from charmed to absolutely murderous with rage, paralyzing her in place. I turned back to the Duke, told him he was arrogant for messing with my friends, and dashed forward. I activated my spell nullification and shoved my fingers right into his eyes. He screamed for me to get them out, but I told him not a chance. He could stay like that until he died. His eye of enhancement was nullified, and as he pulled back, the team regained consciousness. The Duke was baffled, demanding to know how a human broke his power. I told him to search for the answer on Kumu Wiki, though he wouldn't be able to search for anything once he was dead. He mocked me one last time, manifesting a sword, but Lee Se-on snapped out of it and caught his hand. She told me I'd done well, and ordered the team to join forces to take down the vampire now that his mental skills were gone. The juniors opened fire with guns, and the rest of the team unleashed their skills, realizing they wouldn't be a burden anymore. Their teamwork was seamless. Lee Se-on sliced the Duke in half, and I followed up with a 100% output final attack, leaving absolutely nothing left of him. I don't take chances with guard-down moments. Afterward, as we stood among the remains, the juniors praised me. But I just checked with Lee Se-on to make sure no one remembered my confession about the wallet. She didn't, which was the real win of the day. As the exit gate opened, they noticed Kim Ji-hoon was still face down in the dirt. I pretended not to know what happened to him, and they carried his heavy carcass toward the exit. The lady invited me to a celebratory dinner, but I declined, claiming I needed to stay and analyze the dungeon layout for training. Lee Se-on sighed and walked up to me, and then Lee Se-on touched my face, admiring my dedication and passion, and told me not to push myself too hard before walking off. Miri knew I was full of it, and asked what I was really up to. I told her that, while I was a hard worker back then, this was about a jackpot I'd spotted on the map. We found a hidden library, and I pulled a book on a shelf to open a secret passage. Bingo. Treasure. But as I went to step inside, Miri warned me, just as Spike shot out of the floor. The navigation showed a ton of hidden traps that the dungeon was trying to conceal. I realized I'd have to use a special tool for this. I pulled out the staff and summoned Eratos to deal with the mess. Just then, the air began to sour as Eratos clawed his way out of the ground. He took one look at me and squinted, prompting me to glare back and ask how he'd been. He tried to act tough, but then I decided to remind this bag of bones who his master was. I struck his head with the staff, telling him it didn't matter how I summoned him. This caused him to kneel immediately, acknowledging his place. I asked if he always talked so formally, since I remembered his speech being disgustingly stiff before, but he claimed not to know what I meant. Whatever. I gave him his first command. Charge forward, at full speed, into the corner. He hesitated, saying he didn't see anything there, so I asked if he was really questioning his commander and expressed my disappointment. That sent him dashing inward at full speed, only for the first trap to strike and crush his body instantly. I noted that was one trap checked and told him we weren't done yet. He restructured his bones and got back up, and I instructed him to charge again. This time, a fire trap burnt him to ashes in an instant. Another one down. Miri asked if I was seriously planning to keep doing this, and I told her, of course. I don't show mercy to those who tried to kill me in the past. I summoned him a third time, shouting for him to slam rush forward again. After a while, we finally reached the end of the path. I told Eratos he did a good job and was the best detector I could have asked for. He just laid on the floor, defeated, though I noticed a notification saying his overall durability had increased. Normally, a summoned creature doesn't grow just from dying, so I figured it must be the effect of extraordinary growth. The more I see of that buff, the more impressive it gets. I walked right past Eratos without giving him a reward. He was outraged, screaming that even an immortal has rights, but I told him that wasn't my problem and unsummoned him mid-sentence. Miri realized I was a cold-hearted person, but noted the traps were gone, and this looked like the end. She turned to see my focus was lost on something, and I pointed out a massive tombstone. They aren't usually that big, so I figured something was hidden inside. As I touched it, the stone opened to reveal a bracelet made of the relics we found earlier. I wondered if I should get it appraised, praying it was a high-class item I could actually use for once. Miri reminded me that I didn't need to appraise items one by one, introducing the item analyzer. She called it a basic app that users from other dimensions consider essential. I asked why she hadn't mentioned this earlier, and she told me there were many functions in my status window I should have checked myself. I ran the analysis, and it turned out to be a unique grade item with the charm and aesthetics of a vampire. It even had automatic healing. Miri noticed the skills were similar to the ones the Duke has used earlier, but noted they only worked on weakened humans, questioning if that would be useful. I laughed, telling her humans are everywhere, so it would definitely come in handy. She thought using skills on people was strange, but I told her that humans can be far scarier than any dungeon monster. Right on cue, some trash was scouting me from the shadows. A voice on a radio confirmed me as the target, a newly ranked B-class hunter, and told the scout to handle it alone with a stealth skill. The guy activated Silent Shadow and crept toward me. He thought I was just some former porter who got lucky in an assessment, and told me not to hate him for killing me because I'd become too noticeable. In that moment, I swung my leg and kicked his head so hard his nose exploded. He was shocked as he recoiled. He wondered how I'd spotted him without a detection skill, so I told him to stop hiding, since his invincibility skill was top tier, or I'd keep hitting him until he was dead. He eventually begged for forgiveness, proving kids these days have no grit. I told him to introduce himself, and he identified himself as Han Jong-seo from the Red Hounds. I recognized them as that trashy criminal group that assassinates hunters for money. He claimed he was just following orders and begged for his life. I called him Shameless and grabbed him, threatening to use my vampire charm if he didn't talk. Outside the dungeon, his brothers were waiting. Han Jongpil was complaining about how long a simple B-rank kill was taking, while the second brother suggested the rookie was just being slow. I dragged the youngest brother out and called them all pathetic fools, mentioning that their late parents would cry tears of blood if they saw them now. They pulled their weapons, wondering how I knew so much. I dropped the youngest on the ground and told them he didn't know who ordered the hit, so I came to get the info from them directly. One of them charged me with a staff, shouting about a special shadow strike technique he'd trained in for years. He was talking too much, so I just punched him in the face mid-sentence. I told the last one I was running low on mana, so he'd better tell me what I wanted to know unless he wanted to end up like his brothers. Later, at the Hunter Alliance headquarters, the Red Hounds were taken into custody. They had disguised themselves as dungeon cleaners in hopes to finish me off after the rest of my team had left the dungeon. In her office, Seo Yanhua and Tae-jun were furious. She blamed herself for not being thorough enough, but I told her not to apologize. Tae-jun was screaming about vile scoundrels and promised to shatter their spines until they confessed who hired them. I told him there was no need because I already knew. It was Bae Hyung-soo, the head of the Soyoung Guild. They were shocked, but Tae-jun said he knew it. Seo Yanhua noted that Soyoung had climbed from 38th to 7th place using ruthless methods, and now they had the evidence. She decided to take her elite members and head over immediately. Tae-jun joined in, screaming that he wouldn't let anyone threaten his disciple. I asked to go along to see the face of the guy who tried to kill me. At the Soyoung headquarters, Tae-jun was already wreaking havoc, calling for Hyun-soo to come out while people scattered in terror. Seo Yanhua arrived and threatened to burn the entire building down if the guild leader didn't show himself. She didn't wait long before ordering her members to start casting, and the ground floor erupted in explosions. Inside his office, Bae Hyung-soo was frantically gathering gold and money, wondering where it all went wrong. He blamed me, the brat, and planned to run with the cash. Just as he thought he'd escape, the door caved in. I poked my head through a hole and asked if he really thought I wouldn't find him. The life drained from his face. I smiled and gave him my most respectful greeting as a B-class hunter. Realizing he was cornered, he tried to do what every spineless rat does, buy his way out. I stared at the cash for a second, my eyes probably glazing over. I mean, a guy has needs. But Miri's voice snapped me out of it. I told him it was a tempting offer, but I wasn't interested in his dirty, blood-stained pocket change. I walked right up to him and told him I wanted to confirm who else was involved in the promotion exam rigging. He tried to play it cool, claiming the rigging was his plan alone, but I just laughed in his face. I told him to throw that lie in the trash where it belongs, and threatened to beat him senseless before handing him over to HQ. That's when he lost it, calling me an arrogant brat and activating his skill. He actually thought he could intimidate me, saying he only feared Soo Yeon-hwa and Ma Tae-pyong. He sneered that if I'd just taken the money, we wouldn't be in this mess. The S-rank skill Dark Matter. It's supposed to be this flawless defense that absorbs energy and makes close combat impossible. For a second, I wondered if I should have just taken the cash. Miri yelled at me for being an idiot. But as I watched him scream for me to get in the corner and die, I noticed something. I told him to stop pretending. It wasn't even the real skill. He looked insulted, calling me insane as I prepped a simple fireball. I used my QR scanner, a handy little trick for spotting fakes, and confirmed his S-rank skill was a budget knockoff. I launched the fireball, and the look of "this can't be happening" on his face was worth more than the bribe he offered. My skill struck him dead on, and he was suddenly a rolling ball of fire, screaming for someone to put him out. I stood over him, sighing that I'd even held back, and he was still this pathetic. After dousing him with water, I told him the small talk was over, and used my skill to dig for his hidden cards. Later, Ma Tae-pyong was practically vibrating with joy, praising me for catching the scumbag and calling the HQ staff useless slugs compared to me. I played it humble, saying it was all thanks to him and Guildmaster Seo. I asked where Seo Yeonhwa was, and right on cue, she stepped through a portal. She'd been busy gathering evidence of the exam tampering, confirming that while some high-ranking officials had fled abroad, the whole circus was orchestrated by Bae Hyun-soo and his bribed cronies. Ma Tae-pyong called them all trash of trash and grabbed Bae by the ear, promising to straighten out his mind personally. As he dragged the rat away, Seo Yeonhwa thanked me again, admitting she never expected to rely on my help so much. I told her I just wanted to uncover the hidden forces myself, because there was no way one mid-tier leech like Bae could pull off dark magic, assassins, and a rigged exam alone. I told her it was only fair that everyone involved gets punished, which seemed to strike a chord with her righteous side. She asked if I'd found the other bad guys, but I just smiled and said there was nothing. The truth was a bit more profitable. Cut to the Hwiryeong Guild headquarters. The guildmaster, Go Young-min, was staring at his computer in a dark room, sweating bullets. He was furious that Bae couldn't just leave things alone and wondered if the trail would lead to him. He comforted himself by thinking his sealing incantation was unbreakable. Then, a subordinate knocked, saying someone wearing a mask was in the lobby asking for him by the name Flying Fly. Go Young-min nearly had a heart attack and ordered them to let the visitor in immediately. I walked in, pulled down my mask, and let him see exactly who was blackmailing him. He recognized me from the B-rank assessment and tried to act professional, offering me a seat while internally panicking. I didn't say a word, I just started laughing. I laughed so hard I was rolling on the ground like a maniac. It was glorious, and Go Young-min started screaming for his subordinates to stop me. Miri was yelling that I'd lost my mind, but I just kept up the act, running around the office. When one of the goons tried to punch me, I blocked it with my leg and gave them a mock-impressed review of their physical abilities. I told them it was a decent entry test. Go Young-min was baffled, so I formally introduced myself and told him I was joining his guild. His subordinate started ranting about how I was a lunatic who couldn't even use necromancy, but I shut him down. I gave them a history lesson on how their founder, Go Jianghu, was a legend, but now the guild was a bankrupt joke, which pissed him off, but I just walked past him and I sat on their boss's desk. I sat on the boss's desk and told them I was their only chance at revival. Then, I handed over a contract. Go Young-min's face turned white as he read it. Using my skill on that guy from earlier had given me everything. The artifact manipulation data, the dealings with Bae, all of it. I smirked and told my "Dear Representative" to sign. He slammed his hand on the table, but stamped the paper anyway. After I left, Hwiryeong Tae was still fuming, but Go Young-min told him to calm down, claiming my skills were top-notch even if my personality was weird. Young Tae just muttered about me sucking them dry and promised to give me a lesson during the initiation. A few days later, I was soaking up the sun and enjoying some coffee. Feeling like a king, Miri appeared, nagging me about being more cautious since bounty hunters were still after me. I laughed and showed her a ring I'd taken from the Red Hounds. It's a transformation item that changes my appearance to anyone with a low detection skill. She was thrilled that I could move freely, but then asked why I'd picked a 22nd ranked dumpster fire, like the Hwiryeong Guild, over the top 3. I explained that the top guilds are too much work, international calls, politics, and constant supervision. Hwiryeong is perfect because I can do whatever I want, and I negotiated a shameless 10-0 commission rate on my mana stones. Basically, I'm the boss now. I suggested we go shopping to celebrate, and we ended up at Guimao, the largest hunter marketplace in Korea. Miri was amazed by the grand building, and I was explaining that this was where all the rare gear ended up when a voice called my name. I turned around to see a woman who claimed she'd heard about me from her brother. It was Cha Yerin, the head of the Shinhwa Guild and sister to Cha Soo-hyun. I was stunned to find out Shinhwa actually owns this entire mall. She thanked me for saving Team 3 in the cursed territory, saying they all would have died without me. I tried to play the no reward needed card, but then she mentioned she was going to let me pick whatever I wanted from the VIP store with a special card. Well, obviously, I'm not going to be that humble. Alright folks, that's a wrap. The team wants to remind you guys to drop a like and a comment as well, which sounds fitting, but more so if you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like and drop a comment, as it really helps the channel and encourages us to post more. We have really fun videos here as well, so be sure to check out one more video, and if you are feeling generous, you can then subscribe to the channel. Once again, thanks for watching, and we hope to see you on the next one. Bye for now.